My son is 7 years old and a pretty normal kid, despite a few odd, read as creepy as hell tendencies. You see, ever since the day he was born, he has always seemed just off. His name is Ronan, and he was born March 22nd, 2009 at 2:02 p.m. His little sister, Larissa, was born just 2 minutes later. He came out pink and chubby, with that little patent smirk already glued to his features. Larissa came out shrieking in an ear-piercing wail. That trend stuck over the first few months. One of the many little oddities that make up his personality. My little boy rarely ever cries. I say rarely because there is one little thing that has always managed to elicit tears, but I will get to that shortly. Larissa seems to always cry. When she's hungry or needs a diaper change, sleep-shattering screams and tears. Dropped a toy or wanted attention, blood-curdling wails drenched in tears. Ronan, however, never cried. I'm not even exaggerating. As a newborn, he slept fitfully, like he was having nightmares, but never once were tears involved. We had to synchronize his bottle time to Larissa's hunger cries, and diaper change came by the way of good old squeeze and sniff. Not to mention the fact he always had that half smirk, half smile permanently attached to his face. Ronan also had a tendency to smash dolls and toys. Any humanoid-shaped doll would get its head bashed into the ground over and over by the time he was just a few months old. This little tendency stuck for years, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The first time my son ever cried totally shocked me to my core. He was around 6 months old, and I was playing with him and Larissa. My little girl had chucked a little ball, and it hit me upside the head. Being the awesome parent I am, I decided to dramatize the incident and fall out feigning being knocked unconscious. My daughter must have thought it was the funniest thing in the world. Her little giggle erupted immediately. My son likewise erupted, except his was in tears and screams of agony. I quickly hopped up to comfort him, but the revelation hit me like an epiphany. This was the first time he had cried since birth. After I managed to calm him, I decided to pretend to hit my head and fall out again. Same reactions. My daughter squealed in delight, while my son screamed in terror. The day he fell off the couch and split his head open, he didn't cry. Not even when the doctor was stitching up his head did he cry. This may not seem odd at first, but when you consider the fact that most 6-month-old kids don't have the concept of death or danger, you can see why this was so strange. Even to this very day, he only cried when a family member falls out from a head injury. By the time my little man could walk, we had to hide all of my daughter's dolls because he would smash their heads to pieces. He also had a habit of following my wife and I, as well as relatives around wherever you went. He was only 1 when he mastered walking on his own, but he wasn't stringing together sentences yet. I can remember tons of times where I would turn around suddenly and see Ronan standing there right behind me, never having heard him following. He would flash that same little smile he was born with and giggle before bum-rushing me with his arms spread wide, too irresistibly cute not to pick up and hug. It wasn't until an attempted break-in at home caused me to realize what had been going on. My wife and I do pretty well for ourselves, and somehow this must have made us a target, because that was the 3rd attempt in 2 months. Having had enough of it, and the cops seemingly not caring about it, I decided to put a camera system inside and outside my home, mainly hallways and living room areas. Not too long after, there was another attempted break-in. After that last attempt, I decided to go and review the footage. What I saw was disturbing. By the time my son could walk well, Ronan had been stalking everyone in the house. He was like a little ninja, dipping into doorways and hiding behind furniture. And he always wore a blank expression. When I say blank, I mean entirely devoid of any and all emotion. He would just stalk you and stare at your back the entire time with this eerie, ageless expression. He would never be more than 10 feet away, and every time he would be noticed, he would go into the biggest smile his face could muster and giggle in such an infectious way that you couldn't help but smile along. His follow-up was always a charging hug. Always. Perhaps the creepiest part is when his little head hit your shoulder in an embrace. His smile would just fade back to that same blank look. It was like it was all for show. In fact, the more I dug, the more I noticed that he wore the same look when no one was actively looking his way. I admittedly became somewhat obsessed with watching the videos every day, and his routine never changed until he turned 3. It was around this age that I noticed Ronan tended to be a little rough and violent with Larissa on occasion. They were both talking fluently at this point, and part of me thought he was picking on her for being soft. Larissa has always been the type that you had to rock to sleep and read bedtime stories to as she got older. Ronan, however, didn't want part of this. Never once would he allow you to rock him to sleep, let alone tuck him in. Ever since he could walk, around age 1, he was always gone to bed on his own and just went to sleep. Fitful sleep, but sleep nonetheless. I just chalked it up to their respective quirks and went on about my job of being a dad. Not long after they both turned 3, I noticed that my daughter seemed scared of Ronan. Not so much scared like she never wanted to be around him, she just never wanted to be alone with him, even more so after dark. They often laughed and played during the day, and likewise when my wife and I were around. It didn't take long for me to realize my daughter would wake up with bruises she didn't have the day before. Every time my wife or myself asked about them, she would only say, "I don't want to talk about it." Fearing the worst, I decided to set up cameras in Ronan and Larissa's rooms. The very night, I caught something. The video was of my son and daughter sitting in the floor of a room playing with a lettered block set. They were smiling and laughing when all of a sudden my daughter randomly asked, "Did you have any brothers or sisters from before that you used to play with like this?" My son's smile immediately melted away, leaving nothing but that now familiar blank stare in its wake. His hand slowly uncurled, dropping the block he was holding. His little body tensed up so tight he was nearly shaking. Suddenly, he lunged at Larissa and grabbed her arm, then twisted up and around her back forcefully, before storming off and climbing into his bed. I immediately bolted to my daughter's room where she was sleeping. I pulled up her pajama sleeve and saw fresh bruises where Ronan had grabbed her the night before. I awoke her and asked repeatedly how she got them, but she flat out refused to say a word. It wasn't until I took her and showed her the video that she responded with, "Ask Bubby." So, ask him I did. And I'll never forget what he said. I asked him to follow me to my office, and he happily agreed with a smile. As soon as I loaded up the video, his smile faded into that blank look he has always been so careful about hiding, even as a 1-year-old. Care to explain this? I asked him as the video played. He stared at me, unblinking, for so long that I thought he would never respond. The dolls, Daddy, he had suddenly said. What dolls, son? All the dolls I have always smashed on their heads. He paused a minute, stifling a sniffle and stopping the tears forming before they ever fell. I started doing it to try and tell you and Mommy what happened to me. He roared the last part, clearly getting frustrated and angry. My wife walked in at this point, and she immediately knew something was wrong. I quickly showed her the video before returning to my son. Go ahead, buddy. You can tell Mommy and me anything. We won't judge you, son. Ronan seemed hesitant, but he spoke anyways. The dolls. I started smashing them because it's what happened to me. My mind stumbled in confusion, but my wife asked what that had to do with hurting Larissa. He looked truly embarrassed and stared at his feet, but he responded anyway. She knows! I told her about it and she won't stop asking me questions. I don't want to do it, but I don't want to answer her questions. She doesn't understand and always asks bad things. His frustration seemed to grow with each sentence. Well, what are the good questions, buddy? I asked. He looked down again and didn't say a word. Son. I reached out and drew his head up while stroking his cheek. Your mother and I love you very, very much. We will listen to whatever you say without judgment. You promise, Daddy? Mommy? His eyes seemed to reflect a sadness that no 3-year-old should ever know. We promise. My wife and I sounded off in sync. Ronan took a deep breath for courage and went about immediately telling a story that had my wife and I staring with jaws parted. My wife and myself had always had a little inside joke about him being an old soul in a little body, simply because how advanced he was for his age. But we had no idea how right we were. You see, Ronan was walking on his own by age 1 and talking in complete sentences by 2.5. Larissa was never far behind him, but our little man seemed to carry a burden on his shoulders when compared to Larissa, and he always seemed wise beyond his years. We quickly learned why. I smashed the dolls because it's what happened to me. I've been scared to tell you, but I was born February 11th, 1808. I lived somewhere in here in America, and a man who was friends with my daddy murdered me when I was 15. He beat my head into the ground until I died. His little face was the picture of pure sadness, yet he stumbles on, his words flowing out without pause. I can't remember much. I can't remember my parents' faces or the man's face who killed me. All I know is that I had a brother and a sister who died when she was a baby. I can't remember what happened to my parents or my brother, but I do know they never caught the bad man. At this last sentence, he started to hyperventilate and cry. Full-on crying, equipped with little snot bubbles and hiccups. My wife picked him up and squeezed him into a tight hug as I wiped his nose. It's okay, son. Look at me, buddy. His blue eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I really clocked the agelessness in them. Your mommy and I love you very much, and we promise that we will always keep you safe. You hear me, don't you, son? His little face transformed yet again, and he smiled such a sweet little smile. You promise, Daddy? I promise, son. Ronan reached out and drugged me into a warm hug, sandwiching himself between his mother and myself. Ah, thank you, Daddy, he says with genuine excitement. I knew I chose right. What do you mean, handsome? My wife asks tenderly as she caresses his cheek. By picking you and Daddy to be my parents, silly. I've been waiting and watching all this time to find who I wanted to come back and be born to. My wife and I could only stare and smile at that latest revelation. My son is 7 now, and he has had nightmares every night. He wakes up screaming for us, and has added little bits of information over the years. He has been much more loving and open since our little intervention, and he only tends to get angry when asked about his past life. He only likes to talk about it when he brings it up first. Over time, he had said that his past father was a farmer, and they lived in a big white house that was surrounded by fields and woods. He can even describe what his parents and attackers wore in remarkable, accurate detail for the time, yet he still can't picture faces. I honestly don't know what to believe, but I do know the facts. My son has been acting out on this since before he was a year old, and he has had nightmares where he wakes up screaming every night. He is constantly reliving or dreaming of a vision of a time long gone, and very accurate references, and reliving a vision of having his skull bashed in every night. Whether it's a real memory or something else, I truly don't know. I just hope one day he can find peace.